but so I want to introduce, first of all, Mike Doyle, who is a co-founder and president of Space Northwest, a nonprofit dedicated to maximizing the potential of the Pacific Northwest for humanity's future in space. So he is a leader for Seattle Space Community events, organizing NASA's International Space Apps Challenge, Techstars Startup Weekend, Space and Space Data Hackers Meetup. He has over 20 years of experience in software development and management. Mike passionately believes space is for everyone. So we'll welcome him. And then Stan Shull, who's with Alliance Velocity. He is a space industry analyst, consulting and managing director at Alliance Velocity, where he advises space and software companies on business strategy, market and development partnerships. Stan's work experience includes engineering and program management on satellite programs, classified military space missions, and NASA's space station program. I'll let him keep introducing himself more. So we got to, New Space Nexus now was really honored to help support Space Northwest to run the workshop. They did a great job. It was a great success, and they're going to tell you about it now. So please, Stan and Mike, come up and share more with the group.
Yeah, I'll use this. Thanks, Casey. Really thrilled to be here. It was a wonderful experience doing the workshop that we had in Seattle. I'll start off by telling folks a little bit about Space Northwest, why we exist. And then Stan's going to give a little bit of background on the Seattle ecosystem, because I was hearing that people didn't realize that we had such amazing space stuff going on in Seattle. I was really pleased to see the Seattle contingent that showed up at this event and has been showing up for a few years, but we're new, so I thought we'd kind of go into a little bit of where we came from and what the ecosystem is like, and then I'll run you through the recommendations, the outbrief from the two sessions that we had, hybrid space architecture and advanced power and propulsion. So what's happening here? What is really happening here? We are, slide forward, there we go. We are on the cusp of an evolutionary leap. We are moving from being terrestrial to being multiplanetary. And one of the things that struck me about evolution is that it is all about connections, right? When you think about the big leaps, it's connections between singular cell organisms and forming into multiple cell organisms, the connections between neurons in the brain, the connections between individuals into groups that can do more than individuals can themselves. And technology is following this path, right? When we think about moving from singular satellites to constellations of satellites, when we think about single computers into networks of computers, it's all about connection, and we exist to connect. And the thing that helps us thrive and evolve is strong, diverse connections. They engender possibilities that we could not foresee. And that's why Space Northwest exists. We believe that the Pacific Northwest has a unique contribution, and we want to maximize that. And it's a lot about connection. Next slide. We are here to connect, educate, and inspire the communities and the individuals of the Pacific Northwest and beyond, right? That is one of the things that we love about this session, is that we got a chance to connect you all into what we do locally, but we also got a chance to share and broaden and strengthen the network beyond our region. I'd be remiss if I didn't call out my co-conspirators who are instrumental in bringing this together. James Burke, who is the executive director of the Mars Society and based in Seattle, founding member of that organization, and recently back from analog astronaut mission to Mars in the Utah desert. Sean McClinton, who runs Seattle Space Entrepreneurs. He and I have been working on how we bring more people into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And our advisors, former Aerospace Futures Alliance CEO Kelly Maloney, and Stan, who's going to talk to you about space, the space ecosystem in the Pacific Northwest.
Thank you, Mike. So while I'm waiting for the slides to come up, I'll just, right out of college, I started my career as an aerospace engineer on the classified military space world. And it's always been of great interest to me. My career has taken me in and out of civil, commercial, and military space and into enterprise software and back. And it's really exciting for me to collaborate with New Space Nexus and the Defense Innovation Unit here over the since I met Bucky and his team starting in the fall. And so I'm really excited to be back and participate in events like this and learn from all of you amazing people that I've met here in the last few days. So real quick here, I want to just tell you a little bit about the space economy in the Pacific Northwest. But first I need to start with Ukraine, and I'm not going to go through my detailed stories here, but at a super high level, on the left here is Fanat. He's a drone unit commander in the Donetsk region. Basically, he says that the Russians have the same drone technology he does, but the reason he's had an edge is because he uses the SpaceX Starlink communication system for battle management, command and control. And of course, those Starlink satellites are built in Redmond, Washington, just outside of Seattle. But more important, or at least as important, is the humanitarian side. We have pictures here of the city of Irpin in Ukraine. It was brutalized by the Russians during the early part of the war with their occupation. The fiber was cut. The city's 24 cell towers were down. Nobody could communicate or ask for help. As soon as that city was liberated, Vodafone Ukraine slapped a Starlink terminal on a base station, attached a power generator, and got the residents back online. And throughout that whole crisis there, Ukrainians have relied heavily on Starlink to be their communications vehicle. Of course, we've all heard too on the Earth observation or ISR side of things. Here's a picture from a company called Black Sky. They build their satellites at Leo Stella in the Seattle area and operate them out of Seattle. Images like this and from other companies have been used, as you all know, to help the military forces in Ukraine plan their battle management efforts. But again, the humanitarian side of this has been pretty impressive. Groups like Doctors Without Borders and the Red Cross use images like this to pinpoint where humanitarian assistance is needed. So that's just a couple examples of Seattle space companies that are engaged in national security. Last night, I tried to do a count. I came up with about 16 or 17 Seattle space companies that have contracts with the Defense Innovation Unit, the Space Force, or the National Reconnaissance Office, and I am not counting SIBRs. These are real contracts, 16 or 17 companies at least, there may be more. I think the main point here is that the space companies in the Pacific Northwest are leaning into the national security space business opportunity and stepping up to the challenge of defending our country and its allies. Washington area is a very significant space area, particularly in the greater Seattle region. It's one of the major space clusters now in the United States. Hopefully, many of you know that Blue Origin is based in the Seattle company. They design their rockets there, their engines that are powering the United Launch Alliance, National Security Launch Vehicle, working on their private space station and other things. In addition to SpaceX Starlink, we've got Amazon Kuiper in the Seattle area. Between these two constellations, they're approved by the FCC for 23,000 satellites, building about more than 30 a day right now in the Seattle area. Sorry, 30 a week. And they've pretty much reserved a huge chunk of the medium and heavy lift launch capacity over the next few years. Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Services, the two cloud computing giants with a combined market share of 60%, built out space companies. They have ground station services offerings, and they're connecting the terrestrial and the space network and using their cloud computing efforts for this space data analytics. We've got a whole host of great startups, some of which have been here. Stoke Space is here. We have Starfish and other companies, Explorers here, and these companies have really helped to grow the space economy in the Pacific Northwest, which has been doubling pretty fast. So Oh, wrong direction. There we go. Just a quick view of the space economy. One of the amazing things about the Seattle area is the companies cover the entire end-to-end space and satellite value chain, which is, I think, pretty unique. Everything from components to satellites, to rockets and operating satellites in space, the ground segment, in-space services, antennas, you name it, we've got it all. By my estimate, it's about a $5 billion direct economic impact, employing about 12,000 people right now, and a great array of supporting organizations like Space Northwest to help keep this thing going. Just to give you a little eye candy, upper left here, you see the SpaceX Starlink satellites. These are the V2 minis. These are no longer small sats. These are 800 kilogram satellites. The V2 is going to be 1,250 kilograms. You should start to be thinking of SpaceX as a satellite telecommunications company that also happens to have a rocket division. In the lower left, you see the orbital reef, which is Blue Origin and its partners, commercial LEO destinations, space station entry. Upper middle, Stokes, reusable second stage. They're working on 100% reusable rocket and doing innovations that I think are a step beyond what SpaceX is doing with Starship. Dead center, you've got the Explorer and their X-Craft. If you're interested in, satellite as a service, sensor as a service, or data as a service, these guys have you covered. Lower middle is Black Sky satellite. We talked about those folks already. Upper right, you see a Starfish space satellite servicing vehicle. The founders went from PowerPoint slides that I saw 3 years ago to a vehicle that's going to launch on the next transporter mission in June. That's pretty impressive. And then Spaceflight, one of our companies, rideshare company, also has the Sherpa orbital transfer vehicle series. You can see an image of that in the lower right. These are also used for hosting payloads. The ground segment is very active in the Seattle region as well. We have 4 ground station companies: RBC Signals, Amazon Web Services Ground Station, Microsoft Azure Orbital, and US Electrodynamics. You can see the USEI Brewster teleport in the upper left. The satellite constellations, Kuiper and Starlink, are, of course, using optical intersatellite links. So we're getting into that hybrid space architecture activity there. And you can see Amazon's Dave Limp showing off their small user terminals. There's also a company called Kymeta, which is working on the flat panel antennas as well, and has a pretty good business going. So hopefully you all know by now that Seattle is the satellite capital of the world, at least on a unit production basis. Probably right now, just over 50% of all operational satellites in Earth orbit have been manufactured in Washington State. Now, that's largely due to SpaceX Starlink to date, but with significant contributions coming from Leo Stella, who's built satellites for Black Sky and others, Starfish Space and Amazon Kuiper launching very soon, Explorer coming along, and Precursor as well with their constellation. Looking forward, I have every reason to expect, at least in the near term, that Washington State will remain the global leader in satellite manufacturing. And the interesting thing is this is now bringing new companies into the region, new suppliers, and people are starting to do entrepreneurial things around the satellite. So we're starting to see a real major satellite hub in the greater Seattle area. On a dollars and cents basis, billions and billions of dollars has come into the Seattle market over the last few years. A significant portion of the $10 billion committed by Kuiper and Starlink have come into the state. Blue Origin has been getting private investment, and nearly $1 billion of venture capital IPO money and exit into the ecosystem as well. The interesting thing that's happened in the last few years is we've seen now this investment turn into real revenue. So Starlink is probably, my guess, around $2 billion right now in real revenue. Blue Origin's got New Glenn contracts. They've got Black Sky and Explorer have garnered contracts in excess of $1 billion potential from the National Reconnaissance Office over the next decade, NASA and other commercial contracts. So to go back to what Bucky was talking about, going from invention to innovation, I think in the Seattle area, we've gone from invention to innovation, and now we're definitely into scale up. So it's pretty impressive to see this exponential growth over the last, say, 4 or 5 years. If you're looking for a job in space, Washington State and Seattle is a great place to come. 22 months in a row, there's been more than 1,000 open space jobs in the region, and the companies are growing. Workforce is a challenge, but the companies are working through it. If you're looking for a place to locate a company or division, pretty good place as well. We've got a very highly educated workforce, rated the #1 STEM job place in America. Fantastic universities. University of Washington was rated by Reuters as the #1 most innovative public university in the country. And the GDP growth in the Seattle area has been number 1 or 2 consistently among major metropolitan areas in the United States. We're starting to see companies establish U.S. headquarters. There's a few I can't yet put on the logo slide because it's confidential, but companies are going to move into the Seattle area, or new startups that are stealth that I can't yet put on that slide that I showed earlier, but be on there next time you see it probably. So just to end up here, summary, we've got this broad, uniquely entrepreneurial space ecosystem. And the reason I emphasize the entrepreneurial is, say, unlike Houston with the Johnson Space Center, or Los Angeles with the Space Force Base, or even here, we don't have a big federal presence. So the Seattle area has really grown in a homegrown sort of private investment, very entrepreneurial ecosystem that's borrowed a lot of the culture from the tech and software industry that is very strong in the region. And as I mentioned, a global satellite hub, convergence of cloud computing and satellite networks are really happening in the Seattle area. So last slide here. I think historically, people have not recognized, I see some Seattle people in here, but I think we know that the rest of the world hasn't quite figured out what's going on in Seattle. And I think part of the reason is because it's been so exponential over the last 4 or 5 years. You know, we have a deep history back to the lunar rover days with Boeing. Aerojet Rocketdyne's in-space propulsion division is in the area. There was Teledesic in the 90s. But it seemed like there was a lull for a while, but recently it's just been taken off like crazy. And so we're trying to get the word out and make sure people understand what's happening there. And when I look forward and I look at the critical capability we have around cloud computing and information technology, the advanced manufacturing ecosystem we have, and the world's greatest aviation and aerospace supply chain, you put those things together, and that gives me great confidence that the Seattle area is going to continue to be a major leader with our friends and allies around the country and around the world as we grow the space and satellite ecosystem and economy going forward. So thank you very much. Mike, I'll turn it back to you.